They looked like the perfect couple. Emily and Ryan Walker had it all. A beautiful two-story home with a white porch, a well-trimmed garden, and a golden retriever named Max who greeted everyone with a wagging tail. They were the kind of people everyone wanted to be around. Their neighbors adored them, their co-workers admired them, and their online followers envied the life they portrayed. Every morning, Ryan would wave to the mailman as he left for work in his polished black SUV, and Emily would smile sweetly at the neighbors as she watered her roses. On weekends, they hosted small barbecues where laughter floated through the air and music mixed with the smell of grilled food. To anyone watching, they were living the perfect suburban dream. Emily was graceful and polite, with warm brown eyes that could make anyone feel instantly comfortable. Ryan was charming, the kind of man who always held the door open and remembered birthdays. Together, they looked like a couple out of a magazine, beautiful, coordinated, and deeply in love. They volunteered at the local animal shelter, donated to charities, and even mentored teens from troubled homes. Every December, they dressed up as Santa and Mrs. Claus to deliver gifts at the community center. People often said that if more couples were like Emily and Ryan, the world would be a better place. But behind those perfect smiles, something sinister was growing. Something dark and twisted that no one in their peaceful neighborhood could have imagined. The cracks began small, almost invisible to anyone outside their home. Emily's friends sometimes noticed that she'd lose focus mid-conversation or glance at something far away, as if haunted by a thought she didn't dare to speak aloud. Ryan had a tendency to disappear late at night, claiming he had to work overtime or meet a client. Still, no one questioned them. Why would they? The Walkers were good people. Everyone was sure of it. When Ryan came home with small scratches on his arm, he joked about tripping over a stray cat. When Emily seemed exhausted one morning, she blamed it on a headache. The explanations were always simple, always believable. Then came the day that changed everything. A woman named Lisa Monroe went missing. Lisa was 29, ambitious, and had recently moved to town to start fresh after a messy breakup. She was looking for a job, and according to her friends, she had been thrilled when she got a call from a couple offering her an assistant position. She told her roommate that they seemed sweet and professional, even mentioning how kind the woman's voice sounded on the phone. The next day, Lisa dressed neatly and went to meet them at a cafe on the edge of town. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone, and news of Lisa's disappearance spread quickly. Posters went up on every corner, and social media filled with pleas for information. Emily shared one of those posts too, adding a heart emoji and a short message saying, praying for her safe return. Neighbors admired her compassion. Ryan joined search parties, offering to drive around and check back roads. They appeared deeply affected by the situation, asking the police if they could help in any way. Their involvement earned them even more respect. No one would have guessed that the very couple leading those prayers were the ones the police would later be hunting. At night, while the neighborhood lights dimmed and people went to bed, the Walker house stayed alive with a strange energy. Sometimes faint music could be heard playing softly inside, the kind that didn't match the hour. Emily often sat by the window, her face lit by the soft glow of a lamp, her expression unreadable. Ryan would pace the living room, muttering under his breath, his hand running along the edge of the fireplace mantel where a single photograph stood, a picture of them smiling at the beach, her head on his shoulder. To an outsider, it was a scene of domestic peace. But if anyone could have seen the look in Ryan's eyes at that moment, they would have realized there was nothing peaceful about that house at all. Their social media remained as polished as ever. Emily posted a picture of her morning coffee beside a book, captioned "Grateful for quiet moments." Ryan shared a photo of their dog with the words "Family time is everything." Beneath those images, their followers commented things like "relationship goals" and "you two are perfect." The illusion of perfection was complete. They lived behind smiles, pretending to be everything people expected them to be. It was a performance they had mastered, charming, believable, and utterly dangerous. Detective Laura Grant, who had been assigned to Lisa Monroe's case, would later recall how she first noticed Ryan's name. Lisa's phone records showed a recent contact labeled R&E Consulting. When the number was traced, it led to a business registered under Ryan Walker's name. It was supposed to be a small consulting company run by the couple. When Laura visited their house for questioning, she found Emily baking cookies. The scent of vanilla filled the air. Ryan greeted her with a smile so genuine that, for a brief moment, she doubted the lead. They offered her tea, spoke politely, and expressed concern over Lisa's disappearance. Everything about them felt ordinary, too ordinary. After leaving their home, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way Ryan's eyes lingered a second too long on her badge. Maybe it was the way Emily smiled, perfectly but mechanically, as if she'd rehearsed it. But when Laura mentioned it to her colleagues, they dismissed it. "They're just a nice couple," one of them said. "You're reading too much into it." She wanted to believe that, but something about the Walkers felt too perfect, like a picture painted to hide what was beneath. The neighbors didn't suspect a thing. They continued to wave and chat, unaware that inside that White House the story of Lisa Monroe was already over. Emily and Ryan's connection wasn't built on love in the way others thought. It was built on secrets, shared lies, and the thrill of control. They had fooled everyone, not because they were extraordinary, but because they knew exactly how to look normal. They understood people's weakness for appearances, how easy it was to trust a smile. And as nights passed and the police search grew desperate, Ryan and Emily sat together on their porch holding hands, pretending to mourn with the town. "Poor girl," Emily whispered once, her voice soft but her eyes distant. Ryan squeezed her hand gently and smiled, that same charming smile that had deceived so many. The faint sound of sirens echoed in the distance, and he whispered back, "They'll never find anything." That night, as the stars shimmered faintly above their peaceful neighborhood, the Walkers' secret stayed buried, literally and figuratively. The world saw a couple deeply in love, building a beautiful life together. No one could see the darkness that thrived beneath the surface. The darkness that had already taken a life and would soon take many more. The Walker's story was just beginning, and the town, blissfully unaware, continued to believe in their perfect dream. But as Detective Laura would soon discover, perfection can sometimes hide the most monstrous truth imaginable. Detective Laura Grant had seen her share of strange cases over the years, but something about Lisa Monroe's disappearance refused to let her sleep at night. The evidence was scarce, the witnesses were few, and the leads all seemed to end in dead ends. But one small detail stood out. The couple Lisa had planned to meet on the day she vanished. The text messages on Lisa's phone were brief and professional, signed off with E&R. Laura had initially assumed it was a business contact, but after cross-referencing the phone number, she found it linked to a small consulting company owned by none other than Emily and Ryan Walker. At first, it seemed ridiculous to suspect them. They were well-liked, respected, and squeaky clean. But Laura's instincts, sharpened by years of experience, told her that the people who seemed most perfect often had the darkest secrets. The Walkers' home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by trimmed hedges and blooming flowers. Laura arrived one sunny morning, the air thick with the scent of lavender from Emily's garden. Ryan answered the door with a polite smile and invited her in without hesitation. Inside, the house looked like a model home, tidy, stylish, and filled with the soft hum of music in the background. Emily appeared moments later, holding a plate of freshly baked cookies as if expecting company. She smiled warmly, her voice gentle as she said, "Detective, please sit. We heard about Lisa. It's just awful. I hope she's found soon." Laura thanked her and took a seat, observing the couple carefully. They spoke in sync, finishing each other's sentences and exchanging small touches that reinforced their image of a loving pair. When Laura asked about Lisa, Ryan explained that they'd met her for a job interview. He said they were looking for a part-time assistant to help with scheduling and social media for their consulting firm. She seemed nice, Emily added softly, but we never heard from her again after that meeting. We just assumed she found another position. Laura asked if they had offered her a ride. Ryan nodded. Yes, it was raining that day. She didn't have a car, and we didn't want her walking home in the weather. We dropped her off near her apartment. That was the last time we saw her. His tone was steady, his eyes sincere. Emily reached for his hand and gave a small squeeze like a wife supporting her husband through an uncomfortable conversation. Everything about them seemed natural, too natural. After leaving the Walker's house, Laura reviewed the timeline. Their story matched what Lisa's roommate had told the police, at least on the surface. But when Laura pulled the surveillance footage from a nearby cafe, she spotted something troubling. Lisa was indeed seen leaving with Ryan and Emily, smiling as she got into their black SUV. But there was no footage of them dropping her off anywhere near her home. The last trace of Lisa Monroe's life was that footage, her stepping into a car with a couple who looked like they could do no harm. The next day, Laura obtained a warrant to search the Walker's SUV. Ryan handed over the keys without resistance, even joking that she was welcome to dust it for donut crumbs. But when the forensic team examined the interior, they found faint traces of blood under the passenger seat. It was nearly invisible to the naked eye, but luminol revealed a faint spatter pattern that didn't fit with Ryan's casual excuse of an old nosebleed. Samples were sent to the lab for DNA analysis, and when the results came back, they confirmed Laura's worst fear. It was Lisa Monroe's blood. When Laura returned to the Walker's house, Emily greeted her with the same calm expression. She acted concerned, asking if there had been any progress in the investigation. Laura noticed how steady Emily's hands were, how her eyes didn't flicker even once. When Laura mentioned the blood in their car, Emily tilted her head slightly and frowned. That's impossible, she said quietly. Lisa never bled. Maybe it's from someone else? Ryan gave rides to people sometimes, maybe it's old. Ryan walked in a moment later, wrapping his arm around Emily protectively. He didn't look angry or defensive, just amused. Detective, he said with a polite smile, I know you're doing your job, but maybe the lab made a mistake. It happens. It was that confidence that made Laura's stomach twist. The Walkers weren't panicked, they weren't scrambling, they were calm. Too calm. That composure didn't belong to innocent people. Innocent people broke down, asked questions, demanded answers. These two just smiled. As she left, Ryan even called out, "Let us know if you need more help with the search." His voice was cheerful, mocking in its politeness. Laura went back to the station and laid out everything she had. The evidence was building, but still circumstantial. Without a body, the case was fragile. She requested a deeper investigation into the couple's background. That's when she started noticing the pattern. Emily had moved through several towns over the past decade, working temporary administrative jobs before leaving suddenly. In 3 of those towns, young women had gone missing, cases that remained unsolved. The similarities were chilling. Each woman had been between 20 and 30 years old. Each was last seen with someone matching Emily's or Ryan's description, and each had disappeared without a trace. Laura's gut told her she was looking at serial offenders, but convincing the department wasn't easy. The Walkers had no criminal record, no suspicious financial activity, at least not on the surface. But when the financial crimes unit dug deeper, they found large deposits in Ryan's account at irregular intervals. The money came from untraceable sources, each deposit occurring shortly after one of the disappearances. The next step was surveillance. For 2 weeks, the police watched the Walkers closely. They noted how Emily and Ryan never seemed apart for long. They shopped together, exercised together, and even drove aimlessly late at night. One night, They were seen stopping near a wooded area outside town. The officers on duty moved in for a closer look, but by the time they arrived, the walkers had driven off. The next morning, Ryan's SUV was spotless, too spotless. The carpets were shampooed, the seats wiped down with bleach. Laura decided it was time to confront them formally. She brought them in for questioning, separating the couple in hopes of breaking their story apart. But to her surprise, their answers matched perfectly. Every small detail, every timeline, every excuse, they were consistent down to the minute. It was as if they'd rehearsed it. Emily cried softly during her interview, convincing even the junior officers that she was innocent. Ryan, meanwhile, smiled and maintained a polite tone, insisting they had done nothing wrong. When Laura showed him the DNA report, he shrugged. "Then someone must have bled in my car," he said simply. "I can't explain it, detective, but that doesn't make me a murderer." After hours of questioning, they were released. The evidence, while suspicious, wasn't enough to hold them. Laura felt the frustration building inside her. Every instinct told her that the walkers were responsible, but she couldn't prove it yet. That night, as she reviewed the case files again, something caught her eye. In one of the background checks, there was a small note about a storage unit registered under Emily's maiden name. It had been paid for in cash for the past 3 years. The location was 20 miles outside the city near an abandoned industrial park. The next morning, with a search warrant in hand, Laura and her team arrived at the unit. The air was stale and dust clung to every surface. When they rolled up the door, the beam of their flashlights revealed something that made their blood run cold. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, each carefully labeled with dates and names. They contained personal belongings, women's jewelry, handbags, IDs, shoes, and photographs. At the back of the unit stood a mannequin dressed in a woman's clothes, its plastic face painted with lipstick and a smile. The boxes near it had names that matched missing persons from the last 5 years. Laura stood frozen for a long moment. The walkers' smiling faces flashed in her mind. Their calm, their kindness, their perfect little life. The truth hit her like a punch to the gut. These weren't random killings. They were trophies. Memories of the lives Emily and Ryan had taken together. What had started as a missing person case had just turned into the uncovering of one of the most disturbing killer couples the state had ever seen. And somewhere, in their perfect house with the white porch and blooming flowers, Emily and Ryan Walker were probably sitting side by side, holding hands, waiting for the knock on their door. The discovery inside the storage unit shattered every illusion of normalcy surrounding Emily and Ryan Walker. Detective Laura Grant stood in the dimly lit space, her flashlight trembling in her hand as it swept across the rows of boxes. Each one was meticulously labeled with a date and a name, written in neat cursive handwriting. Inside were the personal effects of women who had vanished over the last several years. Wallets, jewelry, cell phones, small trinkets, and even photographs. The organization of it all was almost clinical, as if Emily and Ryan had cataloged their crimes like collectors preserving rare artifacts. It wasn't chaos. It was order. Cold, deliberate order. And that was what terrified Laura the most. She crouched near one of the boxes labeled Jessica 2019 and opened it carefully. Inside was a silver bracelet with a small charm that read, "Be brave," along with a driver's license and a blood-stained scarf. Another box contained a stack of photos showing the same young woman smiling with friends, unaware that her life would one day end at the hands of the people who smiled back from across the table. Laura had seen many crime scenes in her career, but this was different. It wasn't just evidence, it was a museum of murder. The forensic team documented everything meticulously. Each item was photographed, bagged, and tagged. The air inside the storage unit felt heavy, thick with the ghostly presence of the victims who had been silenced. Laura stepped outside for a moment to catch her breath. The cool air of the morning hit her face as she stared out at the empty industrial park. The distant hum of traffic was the only sound. She couldn't help but think of all the neighborhood barbecues, the smiles, the charity events. The perfect life that had been nothing but camouflage. By the time the news reached headquarters, the Walkers had vanished. They hadn't shown up for work, their phones were off, and their car was missing. Laura's heart sank when she realized they must have sensed the investigation closing in. She immediately issued an APB and coordinated with state authorities to track the couple down. Their last known location was a gas station 2 hours away, where security footage captured them buying snacks and laughing, as if they were heading off on a weekend trip rather than running from murder charges. Emily wore sunglasses and a baseball cap. Ryan had grown a slight stubble. They looked casual, even carefree. Laura and her team worked around the clock, piecing together the Walkers' movements. They traced credit card activity, spoke to toll booth attendants, and reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance footage. Every step revealed how calculating the couple truly was. They used cash whenever possible, switched vehicles multiple times, and avoided staying anywhere for long. Yet Laura knew that killers like them didn't just vanish. They always left a trail, even if it was faint. Meanwhile, the media exploded with the story. The perfect couple killers, as they were soon dubbed, dominated national headlines. Neighbors were interviewed on television, their disbelief evident. They spoke about how kind Emily and Ryan had been, how they loved animals, how they once helped an elderly woman fix her mailbox. The contrast between their public image and the horror of their crimes fascinated and horrified everyone watching. One neighbor tearfully said, "They looked so happy. You'd never think they were capable of hurting anyone." That was the irony. Emily and Ryan didn't just hide behind their charm. Their normalcy was their weapon. Back at the police station, Laura sifted through the evidence collected from the storage unit. She noticed something peculiar. Each set of items had something in common. A personal note. Sometimes it was a card, other times a handwritten letter. They weren't written by the victims, but by Emily. The handwriting was elegant, almost beautiful. Each note contained a variation of the same sentence. "You were chosen because you trusted us." It was hauntingly deliberate. It was as if Emily wanted to immortalize her manipulation, to take ownership of the victim's final moments. As the investigation deepened, Laura began to understand the psychology behind the Walkers' relationship. They weren't just partners in life, they were partners in control. Emily was the manipulator, the one who lured the victims in with kindness and warmth. Ryan was the enforcer, the one who ensured the plan was carried out. Together they fed off each other's darkness, growing more confident with every kill. Their love wasn't built on affection. It was built on power and the thrill of domination. 2 weeks after the discovery, a breakthrough came when a witness spotted the couple at a motel near the state border. Police rushed to the scene, but by the time they arrived, the room was empty. Inside, they found remnants of food, a half-empty bottle of wine, and a journal belonging to Emily. Laura flipped through its pages carefully. The entries were chilling. Emily wrote about how much she loved Ryan, about how their connection made her feel invincible. In one passage, she described the look in their victims' eyes as they realized the truth. "It's beautiful," she wrote, "the moment when trust turns to fear. It's when people finally see the world for what it is." The next morning, Ryan's SUV was found abandoned near a riverbank. Footprints led into the woods, and the search team spread out immediately. Helicopters scanned the area while dogs picked up their scent. Hours later, they found the remains of what looked like a campsite. Ashes, a burnt photograph of the couple together, and a single wedding ring resting on a log. It wasn't clear if they were trying to fake their deaths or destroy evidence, but one thing was certain: they were still out there. While the manhunt continued, Laura focused on the details of their crimes. Each victim had been someone vulnerable, women looking for jobs, new beginnings, or companionship. The Walkers had a pattern. Emily would find them online, charm them with friendliness and opportunity, and once trust was established, they'd strike. The victims were chosen carefully, with no family nearby or anyone likely to notice their disappearance right away. That precision showed experience. They had done this for years, hiding in plain sight. Then came the call that changed everything. A hiker in a nearby town reported seeing a woman matching Emily's description, buying supplies at a gas station. Surveillance footage confirmed it. It was Emily, and she was alone. Her hair was dyed black, her clothes different, but her face gave her away. She looked thinner, more tense, but her eyes were the same, calm and focused. The footage showed her glancing toward the camera once before disappearing out of frame, as if she knew they were watching. Later that evening, a second call came in from a small motel 10 miles from that gas station. The clerk said a woman had checked in using a fake name. When officers arrived, they surrounded the building quietly. Inside room 12, they found Emily sitting by the window, staring out into the dark parking lot. She didn't run or fight. Instead, she turned slowly and smiled at the officers. "You took long enough," she said softly, as if she had been expecting them. Ryan wasn't with her. When they asked where he was, she looked down at her hands and whispered, "He's where he wanted to be." The next morning, search teams found Ryan's body near the river where the SUV had been left. He had taken his own life, leaving behind a note that read, "For Emily, always." During interrogation, Emily showed no remorse. Her calmness was unsettling. She spoke about Ryan with affection, describing him as her soulmate, her perfect partner. When asked about the victims, she tilted her head slightly and said, "They were lost souls. We gave them an ending with meaning." Laura had seen killers rationalize their actions before, but Emily's detachment was different. It wasn't denial, it was pride. After hours of questioning, she finally said something that would haunt Laura for years. "You think you caught us?" Emily whispered, smiling faintly. "But people like us are everywhere. We just learned how to hide better than most." Those words lingered in Laura's mind long after Emily was charged and taken into custody. The case was closed, the evidence overwhelming, but the unease remained. The Walkers had fooled everyone, their neighbors, their friends, even the police for a time. They had turned the image of love into a weapon, using charm and trust to destroy lives. As Laura drove past their now empty house weeks later, she saw a for sale sign on the lawn. The garden was overgrown, the paint beginning to chip, the windows dark. It was hard to imagine that the same house that once symbolized perfection had been the home of monsters. And yet that was the truth. Evil doesn't always look like darkness. Sometimes, it looks like a smile shared between two lovers who believe they'll never be caught. The night Emily Walker was captured, a heavy rain had settled over the town. The streets glistened with reflections of flashing police lights as Detective Laura Grant stood outside the motel, watching Emily being escorted into the back of a police cruiser. Even with her hands cuffed and her hair soaked from the rain, Emily looked eerily composed. Her eyes, cold and unreadable, met Laura's for a brief moment, and a faint smile crossed her lips, one that sent a chill through Laura's bones. It wasn't the smile of a broken criminal. It was the smile of someone who believed she had already won something invisible. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, media frenzy, and public outrage. The story of the killer couple who fooled everyone dominated every headline. News anchors dissected every detail. Psychologists debated the depth of their manipulation, and social media overflowed with disbelief. Photos of Emily and Ryan at charity events and family gatherings were splashed across television screens, each image a painful reminder of how completely they had deceived the world. People who once admired them were now haunted by the thought that they had been so close to evil without ever knowing it. Ryan's death only deepened the mystery. His body was found near the river, lying peacefully on the muddy bank. Beside him was a photograph of him and Emily taken at their wedding, the edges worn from years of handling. The note found with him was short, just 3 words written in his handwriting. For Emily, always. It was both a declaration of love and an admission of guilt. He had chosen to die rather than face what was coming, leaving Emily to bear the weight of their crimes alone. When the autopsy results confirmed his cause of death, Emily was informed. Her reaction was not what anyone expected. There were no tears, no shock, just silence. After a long pause, she looked up at Detective Grant and said quietly, "He finally kept a promise." That was all. No grief, no remorse, only that cold acceptance that chilled everyone in the interrogation room. Over the next few weeks, Emily underwent multiple interrogations. Every attempt to break her emotionally failed. She answered questions calmly, politely, even with a hint of charm. When asked how many victims there really were, she smiled faintly and said, "Enough." Laura pushed harder, showing her photos of the victims, reading their names aloud, hoping to trigger some kind of reaction. But Emily only tilted her head, her eyes distant. "You're wasting your sympathy," she murmured. "They trusted the wrong people. The world is full of liars. We were just honest about it." Her defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim of manipulation, claiming Ryan had controlled her. But the evidence told another story. The notes found in the storage unit, the journal entries, and the communication records between her and Ryan revealed that Emily had been equally involved, if not the driving force behind many of their crimes. She wasn't just complicit. She was a willing architect of their shared madness. As the trial began, the courtroom was packed every day. Reporters filled the seats. Sketch artists captured every flicker of Emily's expression. And the families of victims sat in the front row, clutching tissues and photographs of their loved ones. Emily entered the courtroom dressed neatly, her posture perfect, her face serene. If anyone expected a broken woman, they were disappointed. She didn't cry when the evidence was presented. Didn't flinch when photos of her victims appeared on the screen. Instead, she watched everything with the calm curiosity of someone observing a story that wasn't their own. The prosecution laid out a chilling narrative. They described how Emily and Ryan had chosen their victims carefully, women who were new to town, vulnerable and alone. They would approach with offers of help or friendship, using charm as their weapon. Once trust was established, the victims would be lured into private meetings under the guise of job interviews or opportunities. What happened next was still unclear, but the end was always the same: disappearance, silence, and eventually death. Forensic experts testified about the blood evidence found in the Walker's SUV and the items from the storage unit. Each piece built the picture of a couple who viewed murder as a shared secret, a private ritual that bonded them together. When the prosecution displayed the handwritten notes Emily had left with each victim's belongings, the room went completely still. The words, "You were chosen because you trusted us," echoed through the courtroom like a haunting refrain. During cross-examination, Emily's composure cracked for the first time, not with guilt but with irritation. When a prosecutor asked her if she felt sorry for what she had done, she gave a small laugh. A sound so cold that even the court reporter looked up from her keyboard. "Sorry?" she repeated. "For what? For seeing people the way they really are? Everyone wants something. Detective Grant wanted justice, Ryan wanted love, the others wanted help. We just gave them what they asked for." Her attorney tried to silence her, but it was too late. The damage was done. The jury had seen her true nature. A woman who didn't feel regret, only superiority. She wasn't delusional or insane. She was completely aware of what she had done and believed it justified. In her mind, she and Ryan were partners in something purer than the world could understand. The trial lasted 3 months. Every day, Detective Grant sat through the proceedings, sometimes feeling the weight of it pressed down on her chest. She couldn't shake the memory of Emily and Ryan's smiling faces during their first interview, the way they had seemed so harmless. It was a reminder that evil rarely comes with warning signs. It hides behind politeness, charm, and laughter. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom was silent. Emily Walker was found guilty on all counts. Multiple charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the words echoed through the courtroom, Emily didn't react. She stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, her face expressionless. But when the judge asked if she had anything to say before being escorted out, she looked directly at Detective Grant and spoke softly into the microphone. "We weren't pretending," she said. "We really did love each other. Maybe that's what made it so easy." Her words sent a ripple through the courtroom. For a brief second, even the families of the victims fell silent, unsure if they were hearing a confession or a warning. Emily smiled faintly once more, then turned and walked out, escorted by officers. The sound of the door closing behind her marked the end of the case, but not the end of her story. In the months that followed, the legend of the killer couple only grew. Documentaries, podcasts, and true crime shows dissected their every move. People obsessed over how they had fooled everyone, how they had lived among normal families, how they had volunteered at shelters, how they had hidden their crimes behind charity and affection. Their faces became symbols of deception, reminders that monsters don't always wear masks. Detective Grant tried to move on, but the case never truly left her. She visited the storage unit once more after the trial, now sealed and marked as evidence. Standing there, surrounded by the silent reminders of the victims, she felt both sorrow and anger. She thought about Emily's last words and realized that for the Walkers, love had not been redemption. It had been the weapon that bound their evil together. Years later, Laura would still receive letters from prison. Emily wrote them herself, always in neat handwriting, always addressed the same way. "Dear Detective Grant." The letters were strange, part reflection, part provocation. In one, Emily wrote, "Ryan would have liked you. You see things others don't, that's rare." In another, she said, "Love makes people dangerous. You should know that by now." Laura never responded, but she kept the letters locked away in a drawer, a grim reminder of the case that had defined her career. Sometimes, when she drove past the old Walker house, now owned by another family, she felt a quiet unease. The porch had been repainted, the garden restored, the laughter of new children echoing from the backyard. It all looked so peaceful, so ordinary, and yet every time she saw it, she remembered Emily's haunting words. "We weren't pretending." Because in the end, that was what made their story unforgettable. They hadn't just fooled their neighbors, their friends, or the police. They had fooled themselves into believing that love could justify anything, even murder. And as Laura would often say when asked about the case years later, sometimes evil doesn't hide in darkness. It smiles right at you from across the white picket fence.